Hello, everyone. We hope you're doing well and wanted to thank you for joining us for this webinar today. A couple of housekeeping items before we get started. If you have any issues with your audio, please try logging out and logging back in. If that doesn't work, you can always call in using the phone number listed on your registration email. And should you have any questions throughout the webinar, please submit them using the chat box and we will get to those at the end. This webinar will focus on preparing your business to return to work in this new reality. Speaking today will be Dr. Anita Hicks, who is the Associate Director of the Oakland Center. The OC is a self-sustaining auxiliary where Dr. Hicks employs a forward-thinking approach to developing, contracting, and managing public and private sector partnerships for food services, bookstore operations, conferencing and events, as well as working as a consultant and speaker. And with that, I will turn it over to Dr. Hicks.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our webinar on COVID readying your business for return to work. So the first slide is, who am I? Ashley, do you have the slides up?
Yep. Can you not see them?
I cannot.
Oh, interesting.
Stand by, everyone.
There we go.
Okay. So who am I? As Ashley mentioned, I'm Dr. Anita Hicks. I am the Associate Director at Oakland University, as well as I am over conference and events for about 8,000 meetings and events every year. For purposes of this webinar, I am part of an emergency operation committee, which consists of 22 people across campus, and our responsibility for this committee is COVID readying our campus. The campus consists of roughly about 24 to 25,000 people, so the decisions that these 22 people make go up through the vice presidents and on to the presidents. So next slide. So importance of this topic. When you think about why we are here, one of the reasons that you want to look at is that we're all in this together. Doesn't matter what your business is or your industry is, we're all right here in the same spot, and we've all been affected one way or the other. It's important for you to be proactive in your plan and process as you move forward. And because of that, things are different. So as we move through the presentation, we'll get more into that. So a question that I have for you today, and something for you to think about throughout the presentation, is what is your business and how do you attract and maintain your customers? So really give that some thought as we move through. So the first thing I want you to be aware of is the executive order. For many of you, if you followed the executive order, they've changed. I believe we're up to 2020-110. They can change daily. Sometimes they change in the course of a day, a couple of times a day. But for purposes of the presentation or the webinar, they have some specifics that we're up to now, which will affect your business, whether you have loosely started to reopen or you're already in the planning phases. So one is that businesses or operations that require its employees to leave their home are subject to rules and face guarding. Also, something that was new is that you can gather and or meet, if you will, in excess of up to 10 people inside. You also can have an outside gathering. Michigan and weather, it's the summer for us, and so we like to go outside. So you can have up to 100 people meet outside socially. And then it's really important as you begin to look at either phasing your people back into work, or either if you're already there, is being aware of we are all now required to wear masks based on social distancing, depending on what area that you're in. Next slide. So created a toolkit. As part of this toolkit, there are 6 areas that should be in your toolkit that will help you move that process along in planning your entry back into the workplace. The first in your toolkit is the executive order. At this point, you should have a good understanding of what that means. Customer service. Well, your business is based on customers. And so you also want to look at how are you servicing your customers, and what will that look like once you are back at full capacity, if you will. Staffing is huge, because in order for you to get back to where you need to be, you need your staff on board. And it's really important that your staff feel comfortable coming back. So that should be in your toolkit as well. Budget. So all of our budgets have suffered. Doesn't matter what your business is. Some budgets have went to virtually nothing, and some have just been cut at a minimum. Whatever your situation is, you want to continually monitor what that budget looks like and how is that applicable to your business and moving forward. And then marketing and advertising. So in your toolkit, as you look at moving back into functioning your business, what type of marketing or advertising are you doing to attract those customers or pull your existing customers back into your businesses? And then finally, pricing. This is a good area, because what are you doing for those customers? Are you doing any type of discounts? Are you saying that if you come back, we'll maintain current prices for the next fiscal year, whatever your fiscal year is? But really, you want to look at what that price point looks at, because just like all of the businesses have come to a standstill, so has those customers and their finances. So while we want them back, we want to make sure that they can afford to come back to our existing businesses. So after you have all the items in your toolkit, you want to formulate a plan. So part of your plan is looking at the old way you did business and versus the new way of conducting business. Really important to prioritize. What does that mean? Is it going to be a shortage from what you've done before? How are you going to move forward in such a trying time, if you will? There's collaboration involved depending on what your business is. You want to collaborate with the various units and departments, whether it's human resources, whether it's other areas of your business. You want to make sure in this plan that everyone is on the same page. Just kind of going through the list, not to touch on everything, but supplies. Supplies are really important here, because they're many areas are a lack of supplies, such as personal protective items that you may need. So you should understand what that looks like. Are you ordering supplies and they may be delayed in shipping? What does that mean for your business, for your staff? So you want to look at and communicate with your vendors to find out what you need to keep your staff, employees, and your customers safe. Workspaces. This is something that is not talked about a lot. At one point, workspaces were more open depending on what your business were. It was more of a cubicle versus offices, and that's not necessarily going to work as we move forward immediately. So you really want to look at in your operation, how many people are sitting next to each other? Is it 6 feet of space? When they transfer, walking past each other, what does that look like? So really take a hard look at your spaces. You also want to make sure that you are communicating, and more importantly in your plan, you want to have a timeline. So I'd like to give a couple of examples that I've experienced as part of the task force that may help you out. So meeting spaces. In oversight of meetings and events, meeting spaces come up. So to give you an example, if you have a room with a capacity of 48 people, with social distancing, that will bring that number down to about 12 maximum in that meeting space. And so depending on what your business is and what area, how you're attracting your customers, that may affect how you plan that meeting. Same example with a smaller room. There's a room that typically holds 20 people in it. that is now sized down to about 4 individuals. So definitely something you want to keep in mind as you start to look at how can we get back into the workforce. And then break areas. Well, in many offices, food service may not be available right away, but you may have break areas. People may share refrigerators, people may share the microwave. So what does that look like from a sanitation perspective? Who's going to clean that? How often are people able to use that? Can people come in and out? What does that frequency look like? And I do want to touch on entrances and exits. That's something that we've faced on campuses. When you think about a building and you go in and out the building, a lot of times you go in the same way that you come out. And so think about in your areas, is that 6 feet apart? And so that's also something that you have to take in consideration when you start to phase people back into your businesses. Workforce, I'll just go over briefly. The number of people in the office is pretty self-explanatory, but workforce, whether your workforce used to be face-to-face and now is virtual, that may not work for every situation in every business. So you really have to look at what that looks like, what does that feel like, and how does that affect your customer. And then, as I mentioned, communication is a large component to this. In our case, we have to communicate with human resources. We have a police department, environmental, which helps us out with not only day-to-day numbers on the pandemic and how that's affecting our community, but also what supplies are available, testing, etc. And then for us, it's also been important to look at the marketing. What type of information is going out there, because you want to keep people in the loop about your business. And then finally, for us, communication includes us making the decision and pushing that up to the leadership so we can give that information to the external community. So once you have a plan, and I've shared some of the examples, you want to have a couple of phases for this. And so that's what some of the executive orders have really been about, is coming back in phases. Whether your business is large or small, you may have 2 or 3 phases, you may have 5 or 6 phases. For the webinar, we're going to look at 4 phases. So phase number 1 is operating during the pandemic. So what did that look like? Were you not operating at all? Were you operating very smallly? Most people were not operating at all. We are in phase 2, which is improving conditions. Some of the executive orders have been lifted. People are slowly trying to return back to their spaces where they worked at, welcoming in customers. And so that is improving. Phase 3 is really somewhere down the line as we get back into the new swing of things and new cases come. We really want to contain those, and by some of the safety measures that are being put in place, if heaven forbid something comes up and new cases develop, we want to take care of those right away so that they are not spread like it has been in the past. And then the final phase for the webinar is the post-pandemic. What does life look like for you and your business post-COVID? And so that's something that you can look at and think, okay, are there measures that we're going to do differently, staffing, budget? That is something that you want to really think about. So then our customers come into play, because as we know, they're a huge component of any business. So there's 3 levels of engagement. The first one is engage. So engage would be, how did you engage with your customers prior to COVID? What type of communication did you have with them? Did you talk to them regularly? Did they come in and out your business? What did that look like? Well, during the past 2.5 months, we've been disengaged. So what that means is some businesses may not have had any contact with their customers at all. So where are those customers at? Others may have exercised the ability to be a little more social and either use virtual, either phone or text as an option to stay connected with some of those customers. And then finally, the third level engagement is re-engage. And that's really something to think about. How do you re-engage? How do you draw those customers back into your business? And what does that look like for you? And this piece would be something that you could think about and evaluate as you look at the phases, as you think about your plan and moving forward. So now we're into a non-traditional workplace. So the hours of operation look a little different. Staffing looks completely different. Are you increasing staff? Are you decreasing staff? What does that look like for your particular company? Safety is a huge component because not only is it important for your staff, it's also important for customers. They want to feel safe when they come or frequent your business. You have to also be extremely flexible because change is going to happen. In this case, it happens sometimes daily. So what does that mean for your business and how you operate from here on out? You want to also make sure that there is quite a bit of support. Not everyone feels the same way. There's people that may have a little anxiety about coming back out or frequenting various businesses. And then you want to also look at what resources are available for your business and your staff as you move forward in this non-traditional workspace. So all of this to say, now what? So now what is a big one? So we have all the information. We have our toolkit. We have a plan. We have the phases. We understand that there's an executive order. Now what? So we want to review, evaluate, and implement a plan. You also want to tweak that toolkit as necessary because it can change on a regular basis. You want to evaluate whether your audience has changed. This is a big one. People have been at home. Some people may have been using virtual ordering. They may have not been grocery shopping. Everything has pretty much been done online. So have their requests and needs changed? So that's something that can be evaluated and should be evaluated as you move forward. You want to communicate with your staff. You also want to communicate with your vendors. I mentioned this briefly at the beginning of the presentation. Your vendors, depending on your business, are a critical component to this. Are you ordering supplies? Are you ordering food? What does that look like in delivery? How soon can they get you what you need to move your business forward? So you want to make sure that you are constantly communicating with them, as with the staff. Is there training involved for them to come back to work? What are we doing with this information to make our staff feel welcome back? And then you want to think outside the box. Now is your time. If you ever thought, I want to do something different or make a change, well, you've just been given that pass to do that. So you really want to look at how your operation was ran in the past versus what can you do differently. Keep track and constantly review your budget because that will change a little as well moving forward. The hope is that it continues, that it goes up versus down, but something that you want to keep track of those additional spending for supplies and such. And then you want to make sure you follow and understand the executive order as it pertains to your business. And finally, you want to adjust to the new normal because it is a new normal. And so in order for us as business and employees and staff, and in some case owners, we want to understand what that new normal is and keep everyone safe, but be successful. I'd like to thank you for listening, and I am available to take any questions.
All right. Thank you, Anita. We actually do have a couple questions. The first one is, what would be your first steps in re-engaging customers?
I would contact them. I would let them know what the new business process is, because a lot of customers want to know what you're doing different to keep them safe. If you have a business where customers need to actually come into a building or come into a space, are you doing hand stations with hand sanitizers? What I mentioned about exit and entry, what that looks like. What is your staff doing? Are your staff, everyone should have on masks? Is spacing 6 feet apart? So you want to connect with those clients, whether it's in signage, if it's a small business, and you can reach out to your clients to let them know that information. If it's a larger business with larger components, you definitely want to have some sort of messaging. Thank you for that question.
It's great. And then another one is, what are some tips to determine when your business is ready to move on to the next phase of the phases that you mentioned?
I would say a couple of tips are, one, if you know that you have a plan, you've thought about the phases, you've thought about how you are bringing your staff back, you understand your budget and those budget constraints, and you understand whatever your business are, what those supplies look like. Do you have everything on hand that you need to successfully open your business and sustain it? And what are you doing to attract those customers? So when you have all those things, as well as looking in your toolkit may look a little differently than the one that was stated, but you do want to be sure that all areas are covered, and particularly as it pertains to safety, because there's a lot of anxiousness out there. And as I mentioned, things with the order change daily. So you just want to keep track. I'm always available if you have any questions or you want to email me to kind of assist and walk you through individually what that may look like. Thanks again for the question.
Great. We'll give it a few more minutes, see if any more questions come through. But if any of the attendees can't think of a question right now, but they have one in the future, you can either email Anita or email me, and I will direct those questions to her. My email is agibbard@easternmichiganbbb.org. So we'll just give it a few more seconds here, see if anybody has a question.
And I do want to say, while we're waiting to see if there's any more questions, this is more, this webinar is more of a template. So take out what you need and use it for your business, and everything you may not need, but it's very useful information and more or less a guide to assist you in whatever your business is.
Great. That looks like all we have for now, so we will end a couple minutes early. You will all receive this recording in an email tomorrow, along with a handout that Anita has provided for you. So be on the lookout for that, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you, everyone.